Hello, my name is Stephanie Wu. I'm an education programs consultant in the Technical Assistant and Monitoring Office. On behalf of our office, I want to welcome you to our presentation. This presentation will provide an overview of the non-regulatory guidance, English Learners and Title III of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or the ESEA, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act, the ESSA. This guidance was released from the U.S. Department of Education in September 2016. If you have any questions about the information provided in this webinar, you are welcome to call our office at 916-319-0845. The contact information will also be provided at the end of the presentation. Today's presentation will provide a high-level overview of Title III guidance with a focus on a few provisions that have changed under the ESSA. First, we will highlight the activities that have moved from Title III to Title I under the ESSA amendment. We will discuss Title III subgrants, supplement, not supplant requirements with specific topics for translation of information, administrative costs, and early learning. We will then discuss English language proficiency standards, language instruction educational programs, professional development, parent, family and community engagement, immigrant children and youth subgrants, and the changes to reporting requirements under the ESSA amendment. Before we go into Title III guidance, let's start with some recent figures about our students and the program. For the 2016-17 school year, the number of English learners in California is about 1.3 million, which is about 21% of the total enrollment. California received about 134 million Title V funding for school districts. The average is about $100 per student per year. According to the California Department of Education data quest, the most commonly spoken languages in California are Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin. Now that we've talked about the numbers, let's turn to the guidance. The U.S. Department of Education issued a guidance to help school districts and schools provide effective services that improve English language proficiency and academic achievement of English learners through Title III of the ESEA as amended by the ESSA. This presentation is based on information from the guidance to provide information about changes to Title III under the ESSA. We will also provide clarification on some issues and policy or programmatic recommendations. The guidance will be effective beginning with the 2017-18 school year. We will provide a web link of the guidance at the end of this presentation. Let's review the general purpose of the Title III program. The general purpose of the Title III program has not changed under the ESSA. The purpose of Title III is to help ensure that English learners, including immigrant children and youth, attain English language proficiency and meet the same standards that all children are expected to meet. It's helpful to think about the big picture of the ESEA provisions related to English learners that have moved from Title III to Title I with the ESSA amendments. The provision of state activities that have moved from Title III to Title I are the inclusion of English language proficiency or ELP standards and assessment. The ELP goals for accountability purposes and the English learner academic achievement in attaining ELP have been moved to Title I under a separate component. These changes are intended to facilitate a unified statewide approach to support English learners across Title I and Title III. Here are the local educational agency activities that have moved from Title III to Title I. EL parent or guidance notification regarding language instruction educational programs has been moved to Title I for supplemental language instruction. Parent outreach and involvement has been moved to Title I under Parent Involvement Policy. Reporting number and percentage of English learners achieving ELP has become Title I EL reporting requirement. Let's review the fiscal issues. Since several ESEA provisions regarding English learners have been moved to Title I, how does it affect the allocation of Title III funds? Well, there are no change to the requirements. Title III has its own provision prohibiting supplanting of other federal, state, and local funds. Title III funds cannot be used to fund LEA's obligations under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Equal Educational Opportunities Act, or the EEOA. The California Department of Education continues to conduct Title III fiscal and program monitoring of LEAs to ensure that LEAs spend the Title III subgrants in a manner consistent with the federal law and guidance. This flowchart shows how the federal Title III formula subgrants and immigrant subgrants allocated. LEAs may use up to 2% of EL and immigrant subgrants for direct administrative costs. The other 98% must be spent on effective language instruction educational program for English learners, professional development, and other allowable activities. We will discuss administrative costs and other allowable activities later. Let's think about this question. Can an LEA use Title V funds for EL-related activities that are now required under Title I? The answer is yes. The supplement, not supplant requirements under Title III has not changed. Although some of the LEA activities have been moved from Title III to Title I, LEAs may still use Title V funds for EL-related activities such as parent notification, translation of information for parents related to Title III. These were previously required under Title III, are now required under Title I as long as the use of funds is consistent with the purpose of Title III and a reasonable and necessary cost. The use of funds is supplemental to the LEA's civil rights obligations to English learners under Title VI and the EEOA. And the LEA can demonstrate that it is also using Title V funds to conduct activities required under Title III. The key principle for using Title V funds has not changed. Journal funds must provide the base program, including the provision of English language acquisition program. If certain services or support are provided to all students, it will be supplanting to fund a portion of those services to provide to English learners with EL funding. Title V funds must be used to supplement the basic program to address any instructional needs of English learners which are above and beyond the basic program. At the bottom, we begin with the Local Control Funding Formula, or the LCFF. The foundation is the General Fund, or LCFF, to provide a base program for all students, including English language development and the core curriculum for English learners. Title I Part A funding appears next, supplemental to the General Fund, followed by Title III Part A supplemental funding specifically for English learners. Supplement, not supplant requirements remain in the ESSA for Title V funds. And lastly, Title I Part C, more commonly known as migrant education funding, also supplemental and specifically for migrant students. Title III frequently asked questions, or the FAQs, are located on the Title III CDE webpage. The web link is provided at the end of the presentation. Keep in mind that LEAs may not use Title V funds to administer annual English language proficiency assessment for California, the LPAC. Also, LEAs may not use Title V funds for the purpose of identification of English learners, including a screening assessment, a home language survey, or any related tools. The obligation to identify all English learners is part of an LEA's civil rights obligation under the Title VI and the EEOA. LEAs may use state assessment grants to administer the LPAC or provide for appropriate accommodation for English learners with disabilities on the LPAC. Here's another question for you. What do you think? Can an LEA use Title V funds for English as a Second Language or ESL classes for families of English learners? The answer is yes. LEAs may use Title V funds for ESL classes for families of English learners under certain conditions. Here are the conditions. LEAs must provide effective language instruction educational program, effective professional development, and implement parent, family, and community engagement activities. LEAs must ensure that activities funded with Title III must be supplemental and supplement use of local, state, and other federal funds. LEAs may offer these classes to families of English learners, but not families of non-English learners. Let's try another question. Has the ESSA made the use of Title V funds for translation and interpretation allowable? The answer is no. The use of Title V funds for translation and interpretation has not become allowable under the ESSA. Remember, the use of Title V funds must supplement, not supplant state, local, and other federal funds. Title V funds cannot be used to fulfill an LEA's obligation under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the EEOA. It is important to note that all LEAs have language assistance obligations to EL parents under Title VI and the EEOA. LEAs must ensure meaningful communication with EL parents in a language that they can understand and adequately notify EL parents of information about any program, service, or activity of an LEA that is called to their attention to other non-EL parents. As part of its obligation, an LEA must provide language assistance to EL parents effectively with appropriate competent staff or appropriate and competent outside resources. In addition, each LEA must develop and implement a process for determining whether parents are limited English proficient and what their language needs are. Do you think LEA can apply indirect cost rate to 98% of its Title V funds not used for administrative costs? The answer is yes. An LEA may apply its restricted indirect cost rate to the portion of its Title III subgrant that it does not reserve for administrative costs. That will be for up to 98% of its Title III award. Now please note, any funds reserved for administrative costs may be used only for direct administrative costs. This is a change under the ESSA amendment. An LEA may use no more than 2% of its Title V funds for administrative costs. However, as a result of the ESSA amendments, any funds that an LEA reserved for administrative costs may only be used for direct administrative costs. This provides flexibility for LEAs to apply restricted indirect cost rate to the portion of its subgrants that it does not reserve for administrative costs. LEAs may consolidate Title V funds in a school-wide program. The LEA would not need to maintain a separate fiscal accounting records for Title III if it maintains records to demonstrate that the entire program addresses the intent and purpose of Title III. LEAs may combine Title I and Title V funds for the same EL-related purpose, even if it is not in a school-wide program. Keep in mind that most Title I funds are allocated to schools and Title V funds are allocated to LEA level, not schools. As with the prior law, an LEA may join with other LEAs to form a consortium of LEAs to receive Title V funds. This table provides information about the use of Title V funds for administrative costs from the prior law and the changes under the ESSA amendment. This is another new activity under the ESSA. The ESSA amendments further promote the inclusion of English learners in early learning programs as part of Title III. Title V funds could also be used to service English learners as young as age 3 under the ESEA prior to the ESSA amendment. In fact, the ESEA section as amended by the ESSA, which outlines the purpose of Title III, now explicitly includes preschool teachers. Title V funds may be used of professional development for teachers of English learners in publicly funded preschool programs. Also, LEAs may use a portion of Title V funds to provide effective language instruction educational program or LIEP in preschool. In doing so, the LEA should ensure that these LIEPs are coordinated with other programs and services by providing supplemental and effective language instruction for English learners in public preschool. Services should also be developmentally appropriate for younger learners. In addition, Title V funds can be used to provide early college, high school, or dual or concurrent enrollment programs which are designed to help English learners achieve success in post-secondary education. And just a quick clarification, there are many more authorized activities that have not changed from the past law. As we shared earlier, two of the state activities required by the ESSA amendments are the alignment of ELD standards to state content standards and the alignment of ELP assessments to the ELP standards. In November 2012, the California State Board of Education adopted the California ELD standards for kindergarten through grade 12. The ELD standards are now aligned with the state's Common Core standards for English language arts and literacy in science, history, social studies, and technical subjects per the ESEA requirements. This section focuses on language instruction educational programs, or LIEPs. The ESSA amendments make one change to this area to clarify that the LIEPs must be effective. To ensure effectiveness, LEAs are encouraged to adopt criteria to measure whether their LIEPs are effective and are consistent with federal laws. LEAs need to provide LIEPs for all students from kindergarten through grade 12. They may also provide services in preschools as well. Again, keep in mind that LEAs are required under Title VI and the EEOA to provide a language assistance program that is effective, and LEAs must use Title III to supplement, not supplant funds that are used to meet this obligation. And lastly, LEAs must provide for the equitable participation of eligible private school students, teachers, and other educational personnel. This is not a change from the current ESEA requirement. The use of Title V funds for professional development specific to English learners under the ESSA has not changed. Preparation and professional development programs and activities for teachers of English learners must be effective and should be based on the highest available level of evidence and should be measured to determine effectiveness. Teachers who are assigned to provide ELD or other instructions for English learners must be appropriately authorized by the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, the CTC. LEAs may use Title V funds for effective PD for teachers and principals of English learners. Title V funds may be used to provide supplemental staff to support English learners as long as an LEA has already met its civil rights obligation, including the Castaneda standards. Let's talk about parent, family, and community engagement. Just as under the prior ESEA authorization, there is an LEA requirement for parental notification upon child's identification as an EL and placement in an LIEP. This notification is now required under Title I, Part A. Sample letters are now posted on the CDE webpage. Also, parents of English learners may decline to enroll in or have their children removed from an LIEP. Parental decision must be knowing and voluntary. However, an LEA must still meet the Title VI and the EEOA obligations to provide English learners with access to its educational programs. And finally, all English learners must still be assessed annually using the LPAC for ELP until the student is reclassified. Here is one last question for you. Can LEAs use Title III funds for the parental notification upon EL identification that is now required under Title I, Part A? The answer is yes. LEAs may continue to use Title V funds to carry out activities relating to EL that were previously required under Title III and are now required under Title I. An LEA may still use Title V funds to supplement, not supplant, its obligations under Title VI and the EEOA to ensure meaningful communication with parents of English learners. As we discussed earlier in question number 3, LEAs cannot use Title V funds for translation and interpretation. These are the ESEA authorized activities and the additional authorized activities under the ESSA amendment. Some activities are consistent to the use of Title V funds under the ESEA, and some are new activities authorized by the ESSA. The ESSA has a number of new permissible activities under Title III, including improving instruction of English learners with disabilities, offering early college, high school, or dual concurrent enrollment programs, and providing materials in a language that a student can understand. Let's talk about the immigrant children and youth subgrants. As a result of the ESSA amendments, each state will award Title III immigrants funds to LEAs that have experienced a significant increase in the number or percent of immigrant children and youth as compared to the 2 preceding fiscal years. The definition of significant increase is determined by the state, and the definition may change from year to year. This is a change to the formula for Title III immigrant subgrants. Significant increase in the number of immigrant children and youth is determined by comparing current year data with the average of the last 2 fiscal years' data. LEAs must use funds to provide enhanced instructional opportunities for immigrant children and youth. The changes under the ESSA amendments include family outreach, tutorials, and academic or career counseling are allowable activities using Title III immigrant subgrants. The final topic is reporting requirements and data collection. Under the ESSA, there are LEA requirements for English learners under Title I and Title III. This table provides some of the changes in the reporting requirements from the prior ESEA to the ESSA amendment. Title III reporting requirements are, for example, number and percent of English learners making progress in learning English, attaining ELP, meeting content standards, and exiting LIEPs. LEAs are encouraged to disaggregate EL performance data by other English learner subgroups, such as long-term English learners, recently arrived English learners, or EL students with interrupted formal education. Here are the resources for this presentation. The first and the second resources are the Title III guidance and webinar offered by the U.S. Department of Education. Additional resources including the CDE Title III webpage for frequently asked questions and the National Council of State Title III Director website. Thank you very much for viewing this webinar. Here's the contact information for the CDE staff in the Technical Assistant and Monitoring Office. Please feel free to contact a staff member or call the main line at 916-319-0845 if you have any questions. Thank you.